I'm okay with that. My son's got soccer practice. I need to get to it.
I was told that when the lights come up, the speakers will be on. Are they on? How about that? Together on the same circuit. Susan, do you want to welcome people and do the roll call?
Yes, welcome everyone to tonight's Independent Sales Surtax Oversight Committee. We're so thankful that you're here. My name is Susan Millay. I'm the Executive Director of Business Services, filling in for Dr. Amy Desamore tonight. And with that, we'll go ahead and have Tony Caro, our Executive Assistant, take our roll call.
All right, good evening, everyone. Steve Shemp.
Yes, I'm here.
Frederick Atkins. Here. Chris Semino.
Here.
Greta Campbell. Here. Joe Mazurkowicz.
Here.
Brian Rist. Brian Rist. James Dozier.
Here.
Fred Elliott. Fred Elliott. Dennis Perlman has an excused absence. Michelle Perez Macias. Michelle Perez Macias. Sia Sherman.
Present.
And Dan Severson. Dan Severson.
We have a quorum?
Yes, with 7 attendees of 12, we have a quorum.
Good.
We do.
Yes.
Very good. The prior meeting's minutes were circulated about 6 weeks ago and then recirculated to you within the last week. I would entertain a motion to approve those.
So move. Second.
Thank you. Thank you. Does anybody have any comments on the minutes?
They were outstanding.
Yeah.
Outstanding. Oh, well, good. Would you should footnote that on the bottom of those minutes that Chris thinks they're out. So I'll call for a vote on that, please. Verbal. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. I'd like to open the floor to public comment. If we have anyone from the public that would wish to comment. Is there anybody in the audience that nobody has anything to fess up about? Okay, thank you. No public comment. We'll move on into the slides and charter school discussion. And Kathy DePay-Bruno is counsel, as I understand it, internal counsel for the district, and we'll give you an update because there had been some question as to whether we could use sales tax funding for charter schools.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kathy Dupree-Bruno, School Board Attorney. And as Chairman indicated, we were contacted by the Cape Coral Charter Municipality to request to share some of the sales tax revenue with them. As you may recall, in 2018, the board passed a resolution basically with a list of projects as required by the statute, and charter schools were not included in that resolution. It went then to the referendum where the voters voted and decided that they were in agreement with the referendum, and again, it did not include charter schools. So at this point, we have been in communication, specifically my office in the attorney's office for Cape Coral, to try to discuss this a little bit further, as well as look into the legal implications of all of that. We are still in the process of doing that, and the team here at the district is still working and analyzing to see what the options are. Any questions for me?
Any questions regarding that? I was told ahead of the meeting also, and I'll share with the members of the committee, that one of the slides that you're going to see is the capital revenue slide and what our revenues are on the larger scheme. And there's a charter school capital outlay on that slide for $6.5 million for the fiscal year 2022. That comes from PICO funds, as they're referred to, and that acronym is the public Public Education Capital Outlay Funds that come from the state of Florida. the legislature for the last couple, 3 years has designated all the PICO funds to go to charter schools. So for the committee's knowledge, they're not totally left out of the equation by any means, and do have some significant funds that come from the district. And thank you for your report.
Thank you, sir.
I think now we go into the slideshow, basically into the charter school discussion and, or the projects discussion, and if you would take that on.
Okay, Mr. Sill, I'm having a technical
Slide.
error with the presentation not presenting. It looks- I received an error message. Yeah, let's try again. Just before I close it, make sure one more time.
See, your technology genius is sneaking up behind you,
I
and he's
think I'll
going to
close
solve
it
that
and then
problem.
launch it again. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, that's not what she wants.
Maybe because there are multiple out of memory. I know I'm old, but I'm not that old. Okay. Let's see. So maybe I need to close the other documents?
Yeah.
Let me open it in Edge. Which one is it?
The PowerPoint one, final?
Commercial break, yeah. I'm going to suggest that it was sent to us via email, maybe if we picked it up there. Now you're getting
There you go.
warmer, there you
Whoop,
go.
Leave it to Mr. Dwayne Alton, technical
he could
wizard
do
in the
that.
district, to fix our technical issues.
This is the slide that I was mentioning that shows the PICO funds of $6.5 million, and obviously other information, so. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Well, this year's budget projection is, our capital revenue for this year includes $265 million, as Mr. Schimpf previously alluded to. 6.5 of that is for capital school, charter school capital outlay. And importantly, 1/3 of the pie there represents the district sales tax revenue is supporting our capital revenue. And as we've discussed previously, had that been removed, the capital revenue has grown 50% of what it was previously. If you exclude the sales tax, it's a 50% growth rate. Our budget for this year, focusing exclusively on the sales tax budget, is right at $160 million. So each year we take a look at how we're progressing and what the past year's revenue collections were, and you can see that our budget distributes the expenditures planned across the 4 categories that were presented on the referendum, in addition to having a reserve fund which we can carry over year to year as we're developing new schools. An important reason for your participation is oversight of our sales tax expenditures. So we're going to go through our projects and our expenditures, and with your oversight, this communicates to the community that we are properly spending our revenues on the projects that we ask the public to vote on. An important thing I'd like to share with you is a major achievement since we last met. We've opened 2 schools, Gateway High School and Lehigh Acres Elementary School, which produced a total of 3,570 new student stations, all funded with sales tax revenue. When you combine that with the previous new student stations we had gained through the financing of the Lehigh Senior High School renovation, we've now opened 3,783 new student stations funded by our sales tax revenues, and that's approximately 3% of our student population. Okay. We touched briefly on the schools that have opened, and now we're going to proceed to the major new school openings and renovations that are underway for this year going forward. To cover those projects, I'd like to invite Mr. Scott Rickenbacker to give us his detailed expertise on all of our major construction projects. Thank you, Scott.
See which one's going to be easier to see from.
See if I
I
can
might steal one of these mics, if I may. Sorry, getting old.
make it a little bit bigger. Is that better?
Welcome, members.
Whoops.
Can you hear me? Okay. Welcome, members. This is your capital update of the new projects we're engaging in. The current biggest project, one of the biggest projects we have going, and we're in the design phase right now, is the J Elementary, which is the sister school right next to the recently opened MM, or the Lambs Lehigh Acres Middle School project. We started out, this has been a push because we needed seats in the east zone so rapidly that we didn't even open the front doors of the middle school, and we put the addition wing on the middle school. We had some funds left over from savings in the project that we utilized to do vibrocompaction. That's the stabilization of the soil so that we could get that dirty, messy, noisy work out of the way before students came in August. So we're able to repurpose that funding to get that vibrocompaction done in the previous budget of MM. So that work's in place, and we're now starting the design for J building. Both schools are to be open in substantially complete in July of 2023. We're starting the design of J. It's more substantial, and the MM will start shortly, and we'll have that design going at the same time as well.
Next slide.
This is the latest one. We call it Quadruple A. It's the pre-K-8 Estero School in Estero, Florida. We just had our bid opening on that job. We're projecting around $85 million. We just opened our bids, so the next couple weeks the construction manager at risk will be qualifying those bids and then presenting a GMP to us. Now, one of the things that we are having a problem with is steel. For those of you that don't know, Amazon has pretty much bought up all of the bar joist production throughout the United States for their massive warehouse program due to COVID. So they've bought all the rights, so we're having to come up with some really creative ways of how to pre-order and change our steel configurations, and in some cases on a job we just discussed today, we might locally fabricate those bar joists locally with some of our local steel manufacturers, buy the raw stock and have them produce them ourselves here. So anything metal right now has skyrocketed. It's all the way to ceiling grid, believe it or not. So the things you normally would see, aluminum is doubled. Rebar, I'm hearing two sides of the fence on that. The rebar that goes in concrete for the foundations and slabs on grade and so forth. Some have said, a bridge manufacturer on my CAC committee last night said they're not having any problem getting it, yet my concrete suppliers are saying, no, it is a problem. So materials are going to be my biggest hurdle to cross over the next couple of years to get these schools brought in on time. Riverdale High School remodel, we are getting ready next week, next Wednesday, I believe. The superintendent's cabinet meeting, well, there'll be a presentation of about 6 different master plan concepts for the Riverdale High School job. We had budgeted $41.5 million, that includes design fee and FF&E, with a construction cost availability of about $30 million. We're finding that that's not going to cut it. So right now our projections based on any of the 5 master design concepts is between 5 to 15 million over budget. So we want to present these slides, we want to do our value engineering, talk to district staff and departments, and then see where we are with the funding once we talk with our finance committee and which direction we want to go. Fort Myers Technical Campus remodel is underway. We're in the design phase creating those drawings. HVAC, we substantially completed the Cape Coral Elementary HVAC and the Fort Myers HVAC project. The original substantial completion was a little earlier in the summer. We had to get an extension to September 15th, no additional cost, just an extension in time, and that was for delivery of materials due to COVID delays. But that's substantially complete.
Fort Myers High.
Yeah, I just said that one's done.
Sorry.
And then Orangewood and Spring Creek are 2 new jobs that are coming on board for design, and we're entering into the contract and negotiation phase on those.
Okay, that wraps up our major construction and renovation projects. Thank you, Mr. Rickenbacker. Any questions? Mrs. Campbell.
Sorry.
Where are we with the Franklin Park remodel, rebuild, whatever it is?
The question is, where are we with the Franklin Park remodel and rebuild? So the contract has been awarded to the joint venture of Tobler Construction and Owen Ames Kimball. And Scott, do you have any further updates on?
Correct. We just started our initial design meetings on that campus right now. The contracts have been let. I have to come to the board for what we call a phase 1 project cost approval, and as we start with that design, then I can get that approved and we can move forward. But we're already having meetings. Many of our partners understand the urgency of time, so they participate at risk, understanding that until an executed contract is, I can't guarantee payment. But most of the people we work with are willing to sit down and get that ball rolling, so we're ahead of the curve.
Ms. Sia, did you have a question?
I did have a question. What is being done with the old Lambs building?
Right now, we're in design. Contracts have been let.
The old one?
The old Lambs.
Okay.
The current name, it doesn't have a name yet. The current name that everyone's offering to it is the Annex Building.
Okay.
So we are refreshing that building. We went to the board, we got an approval for our first phase 1 funds. The construction dollars that are allowed for that is approximately $8 million for the interior renovation. And we allowed about $16 million for a arts theater, a black box arts theater. It is an art school. It will be an arts campus. Depending on what the ultimate decision is, separate Veterans Park K through 5 and a Veterans Park Middle 6 through 8 has yet to be determined, but that seems to be the road that it's going down. They'll have shared use of that facility for both, since it is an arts campus. What we're noticing are designs. We work with the principal in the school to refresh it, because that school was in some serious need of some help. We're about, as of today, we got a notice of about $11.5 million for interior renovation. So my position has always been, we're going to have to pull money out of that arts building budget side of the fence to support the proper renovation of that existing school that houses children's seats in seats. And I think we can do it all. We got a budget estimate for the arts building, which doesn't have any classroom space or seats in it. It's strictly a performing arts building. And I think we'll still be within the budget that we had, which is approximately $24 million worth of construction cost money. And we should be able to accommodate everything and bring that school up to the level that we want it to be at, not just throwing a quick spit shine on it. One of the things we're doing in there, in case you didn't know, that school was never fire sprinklered. So that's $1 million investment right there. So we will be fully sprinkling that building, as I'm doing also at FMTC, a previous slide. That building was not sprinklered either. So we're going through and we're making sure that these buildings are sprinklered, that we can get that insurance savings on there, and that, you know, obviously our facilities, our expenditures are covered.
Mr. Mazurkowitz.
If you are forced to do the fabrication of your steel locally, have you contemplated the impact on the budget that may or may not have?
Right now, we're forecasting a 20% impact based on steel, long lead items, light fixtures, and some of my county cohorts that I've spoken with were realizing a similar impact. I will know in the next 2 weeks, because Quadruple A and Estero is our first one, full competitive bid, where we're going to know exactly what the current status is and what the market will bear in terms of cost. So it's either going to go through 85, or maybe I'm pleasantly surprised and we're right where we need to be. I hope so. Now, what we did do on Quadruple A is we had to do an early steel release. So I broke policy with the board's approval. We normally would have a phase 1 approval for design and then ultimately GMP, and then I would come back for phase 2, which is the approval of the GMP total project cost. I had to come back to the board at a mid-station and request $4 million for a pre-purchase of steel. We couldn't get bar joist, so we changed the design to W-shapes, just so that we could meet the project schedule in the opening of 23. So, you know, that was one school. We're currently on J. We're reviewing our options there as to what we do on that school. Currently, they're thinking bar joist, but that could change and go to W-shapes as well. On some of the smaller projects is where I would think about locally doing some of our own bar joist fabrication. The bigger projects, I don't know that we have the capacity locally, but that's not to say 100% we couldn't, but we'll be looking at that as well. But we had to do that in order to keep schedule, because if I go back a year, that's a full year of inflation costs that just keeps adding. And right now, when the federal money starts breaking and those expenditures are going, we're all fighting for the same materials, and I don't see inflation going in the reverse direction anytime soon.
All right, thank you.
Other questions? Thank you. Good report.
Okay,
Thank you.
that's it. Thank you very much.
All right, next, we will proceed with a review of our safety and technology projects, and I'd like to invite Mr. Dwayne Alton to the podium to discuss those projects.
I'll go for this one.
Okay?
Good evening. So we have had a lot of work, as you can imagine, in the safety and security areas, along with the technology areas. Summer is always even though it was a short summer, it was a great time of year for us. And as we normally don't get real specific as to the security technologies, I was asked to provide at least, some general idea of what types of projects are going on without getting specific to the schools and what our security capabilities are, but just to share with you some of the types of technologies that we are implementing in the schools. We are upgrading surveillance systems, upgrading access control systems, swipe cards, upgrading the alarm intrusion systems. We also have implemented, in compliance with ISSOC's law, we've implemented a new panic alarm system. That one we can discuss a little bit more publicly. We've shared that with the public, and that is a system that allows for staff inside of the school to trigger an emergency alert system for different types of alerts that can be anything from a medical alert to an active shooter on campus, which we hope we don't use that one, but it ties directly into 911 and takes over the building audio system, the intercom system, and all the computers in the school to let you know that there's a lockdown in effect and that kind of thing. That's triggered from a card that each employee carries. And that implementation was completed in this last quarter. It was started right before this quarter started, and so that's been invoiced out. You'll see those in the expenditures this quarter. And we, work to make sure that we have good radio communication within the schools. So that's another one of the types of things that we're putting into the schools. All in all, we touched every school in the district this quarter with safety and security projects, and it was a total of 118 projects that went into the schools for the safety and security category. In the technology category, we have two projects. One is the district refresh of technology equipment is funded through the sales tax, and while most of the work was completed last quarter, you see a lot of that invoiced out this quarter. So you see those expenditures after the equipment was delivered and installed and that kind of thing. And the other one is our Atlas project. That's where we're putting the interactive technology into the classrooms, the interactive panels, big screens with audio systems and document cameras and that continued. We implemented that in 7 more schools, including the 2 new schools this quarter, and are continuing that project. Right now, we are projecting that for the fiscal year, we will be on schedule and budget with our projects. We do see that we're going to have some slowdowns in this next quarter. We're having some supply chain challenges, as you can imagine. Believe it or not, one of one of our big issues is glass. So those large panels, those 86-inch panels we put in the classrooms, we've got long lead times. They're extending on that. They do plan to catch up production and get it back on track by hopefully the fourth calendar quarter. I apologize. But we do expect that we're going to have a slow quarter coming up, and then we're going to have 2 very fast quarters after that's done. The other thing, believe it or not, that we're waiting on is screws. Manufacturers are having trouble getting screws, so it's I guess the little things that trip us up. But overall, we do plan to stay on total schedule for the year. Just push some of those in our second quarter. Any questions? Yeah.
Considering the new schools and the ability to put the technology you want in them and the safety and security, how much better are they in safety, security, and technology than the existing schools? And are you then investing in trying to bring all the schools up to?
So we're bringing all of the schools to the same standard, okay, as far as the technology and the safety equipment. What I'll tell you is that we have very different designs. So if you were to ask me from a safety and security standpoint, which, are they Are all the schools the same? The newer schools obviously are built for, the safety and security was considered in the schools that were constructed in the last 20 years. Unfortunately, with school shootings and things like that, going to the single building or two building concepts versus the outdoor campuses that were laid out with several buildings that were all windows. Obviously, the technology is not going to be able to make up for those shortcomings. However, we are implementing the same technology in all of the schools so that they have an equitable experience in the classroom and an equitable security experience. And then, of course, for the schools, and then I don't know if Dave is here to speak on this, but and perhaps in the maintenance department may mention this as well, but I'll mention that we are also going back and retrofitting schools for the secure vestibules so that they have secure entrances. And our part in that is the access control systems that go in there to prevent people that once you're in the front office to get into the main facility. And then, of course, maintenance and construction are handling the structural construction to bring that type of safety in the front entrance, similar to what we have in new schools. So it's obviously we're doing the best we can with the building designs, but yes, we are building these to have the same standards in every location. Other questions? No? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Alton, and I'd like to publicly congratulate you for your recent appointment to Chief Information Officer. Next, I'd like to invite our maintenance team, Ms. Barbara Cedino and Mr. Jimmy Thompson, to come up and talk about our pending maintenance projects for the upcoming year. What point are they going to get on there? Would you like to come here or there?
Either way.
Okay, there's good.
Just tell me.
All right.
You can slide for me.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. So tonight we wanted to go over, we have two parts to our presentation. The first part are recently completed projects that we have completed in our department. As you can see, it's been a combination between cabinet upgrades, switchgears, traffic improvements, and pavements. This first project that we recently completed, it took place at Patriot Elementary School. Basically what happened was that we had an ESC classroom that was too small for the ESC students. So we ended up taking a secondary classroom, merging them together, and to create a more functional space for those students there. The secondary project that we recently completed, it's in the cabinet, like I said. One is for Edgewood and one is for St. Carlos. These were both full campus upgrades that took place at those facilities. Next one is the switchgear upgrades projects. They were all main switchgears at these older campuses, so these have been recently completed within the last 3 months. This next one here is actually this is phase one of a two-phase project. The first part was actually to install concrete barriers that to protect the students from the traffic that's exiting and leaving the campus. The secondary part of this project is actually rerouting the bus traffic from this main road here to the northern part of the senior high school. And that would also create like a secondary point of access during emergencies or any case that may take place. So that project would take place, the second part would take place in 2022. One of the most recent paving projects that we recently completed was at Diplomat Middle School. This was actually a milling, resurfacing, and repainting of these tennis courts for the students. The next part of our presentation is the upcoming projects. We wanted to kind of give you an idea how our projects are breaking down. So this particular chart here will show you what the different distribution is per category. We currently have over 74 projects. I didn't include the security vestibules here, but if we have approximately 7 additional projects for security vestibules that will be added to those as well. One of the areas that we're looking at is gutter upgrades. What we're finding is some of our gutter systems, they're rusting through. So we have this waterfall effect that's actually taking place at the facilities. So what we're actually doing is upgrading these with a thicker gauge aluminum anodized metal, which is more suitable for this climate that we're in. Because we have so many different subset of projects, we wanted to just kind of show you in these particular categories all the schools that will be impacted for these particular types of projects. As you can see, it's a variation of windows, elevator modernizations, door upgrades, etc. Next one is our lighting upgrades. We have parking lot lights that are, for instance, this one in particular at Dunbar High School. They're in poor conditions. These actual poles have water intrusion, so the rebar has rusted out and it's taking apart the concrete on the exterior. So that's one of the focus areas that we're focusing on this year for exterior lighting. And then to the right of the screen, we have multiple interior lighting projects that are taking place. Some of it is just partial, which is the gym and dining areas, and the other ones will be full campus upgrades, which is either a combination, which is retrofit and LED conversions. Next area that we're targeting are electrical switchgears. A lot of these switchgears pretty much are main panels. They've exceeded their life expectancy, can't find parts, sufficient repair parts to get to these systems. So by upgrading them to newer systems, we will have more options, plus they'll be under warranty for a period of time. Other areas are flooring generators, as you can see, cabinets, bathroom upgrades, chillers. Again, we broke down the schools so you can see what sites are receiving these type of upgrades in all zones. The next one is paving upgrades. The two pictures to the left are two tennis courts that have been milled and repaved. Concurrently, there is a delay on other materials. We have a delay on paint. So as soon as we get the paint, we'll be able to finish that top coating that's required. And then to the right, you will see the other schools that are receiving paving types of projects. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
Any
you.
questions for the maintenance team?
That's a great report. I'm curious, of the schools that are over 10 years old, has any not been touched by your department in this program?
No, actually, when I was working on this PowerPoint, I was looking through all the campuses, and there really isn't like one campus that really hasn't been touched.
So
Whether it's a small.
virtually everybody's seeing improvements.
Yes. And it was really nice to see. The reason, as I did the breakdown, I wanted everybody to see that it wasn't just one particular zone, it was different zones. So it looks like as we're working through the list, we're really touching everybody that's out there.
And all of these projects are run through maintenance as opposed to new construction, because he's got enough to do in his area, right?
We share the garden.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
A lot of their bigger dollars, what would have been
Yes.
in the capital plan, my department picks up. We work homogeneously and nobody overloads anybody else.
Yes.
We get it done.
Yes.
We're the forgotten souls.
Yes.
These projects here are all sales tax dollars, 100% funded?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yes. So I wanted to show you the numbers because we thought it was really impressive. We were just doing like some more counts, and we're really thinking it's over 90 that we're working on for sales tax this year. But at least you'll have a subset from this presentation of what we're tackling in our department. Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Chris, go ahead.
Question. This is a particular interest of mine, but a lot of these are going into, I see tennis courts, basketball courts, and recreational facilities.
Mm-hmm.
Are these available to the general public, or are these restricted to school use only?
So, some of the schools, I'm sorry, some of the schools are shared with the public. We utilize what's called an interlocal agreement with local municipalities, and all that is available. If you guys would like to look at that and see what schools are available during the interlocal. You want to talk about that, Scott? Or?
A little bit. As Jimmy just mentioned, we do have in place current interlocal agreements, but all of our facilities are available for rental. So we have a rental program and a division here. So if somebody wants to rent the auditorium, rent the gymnasium, rent the cafeteria, rent obviously not so much classrooms, but those bigger facilities are always available for rent.
My point is, the public is paying for this, but the public doesn't have access to this.
Well, when I say
You have
pay,
to go and rent it, so you have to pay again to have access to the things that the public has paid for. So I live in Estero, and we put a $1 million track in, but I can't run on the track at Estero. Is that correct? And so as we're investing in some of these tennis courts, we're still keeping the public away from most of them, unless there's an interlocal agreement to use them.
interlocal agreements is one thing with the county or the municipalities, but we do have a rental program. Now, I can't speak to why the track isn't available for rent. Typically, our rental program is a very minor fee, and what it does is it supports the person that has to come open up the building and clean the facility after the rental is done. It's not like we're charging an exorbitant amount. It's really to cover staff and cost while we're in there. Now, in terms of, that's a great question, maybe staff can find out if that track, that new polyurethane track, will be available for rental purposes. I think you're looking for it more to be opened as general use to the public.
Yeah, I mean, the public paid for it, and they're paying for these. But I understand there's security issues and all of that, but as we're asking them to invest additional tax money into these, I've just asked that we look to give the public access to the resources that they've paid for.
I've made a note of that question.
We've had those discussions in some of our meetings. It is separation from the students and making sure that during school hours we have to make sure that we don't have other people on the campus, because you have to get on the campus, you're on there with kids. And so then after hours, though, how do we secure that part away from the other parts of the campus? Because as you know, with all of our high schools, the students are still there at night doing things, and so we just have to look at how do we make that separation safely and allow that access. So we have been looking into that and having some discussions on that.
And there's a big liability there. I mean, let's say it like it is. You got a guy that's running on the track. If there's no supervision, but the gate was left open because it's a public facility and has a heart attack and nobody's around, whose liability? If a woman's out there running and she gets assaulted, who's out there to stop that? Kids that take their mini bikes and go-karts, if there's no one out there. So you've got to have some kind of supervision to manage it, and that comes at a cost, and someone needs to bear that cost.
It's a battle I've been working on for 8 years. I'm not going to stop.
I hear you.
This is the only municipality I've ever lived in where we intentionally keep the public away from the public's resources. And in all others, if I had a bunch of guys who wanted to use the gym at night to play basketball, we've been able to access the school to play basketball in the gym. But here in Lee County, we exclude the public. My issue is that we then go to the public and ask them for support for the schools while also keeping them away from the schools. And so I think as we go to think about renewing this tax rate, which is only a 10-year plan, is that we have to think about how we have made this accessible and open to the public, not just for the children in the schools.
Okay, and I wanted to answer your single point entry. We are working with maintenance. We've split up the larger projects for single point come to my division. For example, it might be Fort Myers High School, where you have a very open, when you go in the front doors, it's a wide open, so we'll be putting in storefront there. I have 22 of those large projects, which will be completed by the first of this year, coming, 22. And maintenance has the smaller, less complex doors, some sheetrock, electronic strikes. And then we go to the third component, which is Dwayne's group in IT that will do the computerization and card swipes and things of that nature. So we've already engaged in work authorizations. The superintendent's probably signed at least 18 of mine just in the last 2 weeks. The design is going forward, and we should start some construction on it. So the intent is to get most of the schools with that single point entry complete for the first of the year.
Chris, I think what you're talking about too on a larger scale, I mean, I can't go swim at FGCU's pool.
Yes, sir, thank you, sir.
I'm a swimmer. I don't think I have access to FGCU's facilities either.
Well, I know they're used for,
Same kind of
they're
problem.
used for local swim clubs as well.
Unless a swim club
Yeah, it's
rents
owned by
it,
the county.
you know.
It's run by FGCU. So I think that there are public swim opportunities
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, but I'm hearing you loud and clear, but our parks really have filled that bill.
Okay.
And it's tough from a security standpoint, mixing kids with adults. So, other questions?
I'd like to go and play basketball, but I don't play anymore, but, we couldn't get into the gyms either because of that, but I understand the
Well, we
security
know that you're not playing basketball anymore in the schools because they're going to beat you all over the court. Any other questions regarding the maintenance projects? And now we move on to the financial side of things. Is
Right.
that
I'd
correct?
like to thank everyone for presenting the project information, and now we'll move to Mrs. Kelly Letcher, who is going to present our financial component of the presentation.
Well, good evening, everyone. So We're going to show you the same screens that we've looked at before, just going over the new numbers. The first one that you're looking at is the monthly sales tax collections year over year by the month that they're earned. And as you can see, even though we were expecting in '21 due to COVID for the amounts to go down, we really did not see that. We've seen increases even during COVID in all of the areas. So based on that, we're going to relook at our 5-year plan and see if we need to redo our estimates for our revenue in the sales tax. So we will be looking at that. But as you can see, it's stayed pretty, when, you know, it goes up in the past, it's come up this last year. So the ups and downs seem to be at the same time of year, which will help us when our projections, as we go through this as well.
Everybody was staying home spending money.
And the next slide is, oops, let her bring it up so you can see it. It's on the same one. Just flip down. Nope, same. Next slide.
Oh, next slide. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I was going to the next
Yeah.
document.
Thank you. So on this slide, it shows the amount that we've projected since the inception of the sales tax and the amount we've collected. So we have collected $204 million since the inception of the sales tax. In '21, while we were projecting to get about $76 million, we really collected about $88 million. And as you can see, in the first quarter of this year, we were projecting at about 21.8, and we have collected 17.4 million. The next slide just shows the projections to actuals, what we projected with it has the 21 revenue, what we projected for 21, the revenue that we actually received during that time period, and then the difference. And as you can see, that we were $14.4 million, we received over our projection. So we will be relooking at our projections. We were being very conservative during COVID because we really thought those numbers would go down.
Which document would
Kelly,
you
was
like?
the first quarter of fiscal year '22, was that a timing issue as much as a true collections issue?
Yes, it really is a timing issue. As you know, we collect behind. They collect 2 months behind, so we're always collecting behind. So it's really like 2 months ago's worth of stuff. So we should be collecting pretty soon and catching up.
Any other questions for Kelly?
We have a couple of more to look at if you are okay. I'm trying to see which one she has.
I put up the quarterly report.
Quarterly report, okay. So this slide is showing the collections in the last third quarter and fourth quarters of '21, and then the first quarter of this year. It shows the revenue that we've collected as well as the expenditures for those quarters as well.
Annual.
Mm-hmm. This is our annual report. It shows the collections since the beginning by year and where we are, and how much we've collected to date, which is $223 million, which includes this quarter, and the expenses to date. And the last thing we've put up here is, I don't believe we shared this with you all before, but we wanted you to see the estimates for the next 5 years and how we were proposing to, what categories and where we were proposing to be spending them over the next 5 years. Knowing that this is an ever-changing document as things come and go, as our revenue estimates go up and down, higher needs may come in, and so it's a constant moving document, but this is where we are looking at as of right now as a 5-year outlook for the sales tax.
And you didn't send that in the regular report, though, did you?
Yes, it was included. Yes, it was included. It just hadn't been in the reports in the past.
May I ask a question, sir? Sure. This is the one that really kind of threw me off, and I guess I don't really understand the second line, which is the sales tax revenue bond. So just because I'm a simpleton, I think this is a 10-year sales tax that's collecting about $90 million a year. So we have about a $900 million, right? So I see that you've budgeted out through the next 5 years about $930 million. But the sales tax revenue bond, I assume you're issuing bonds this year and next year. And you're going to pay those bonds off with the revenue received from sales tax in years 6, 7, 8, 9?
Yes, so it's really our COPS, it's not really a bond, and so I need to have my staff change that. Remember when we first came in, we were talking about before we received revenue, we were going to go out for a bond to kind of upfront the money, and we should have changed the title at this time. But if you remember last year, the legislative session came into play, and the only way that we can build our schools at this point and go over the cost per student station, which there is no way, Scott, if he is, I think he left, but there's no way we can build a school, and there's nobody in the state who can build a school at the cost per student station amount that they have in the law right now. Because of that, we have to go out for a COPS, even with our sales tax revenue. So those are really the COPS that we are going out for, and the debt to repay those are over the time period of the sales tax, and they are within the time frame of the sales tax. Did I answer your question on that?
Just insert COPS for bonds.
Yeah,
That's all it is.
COPS and bonds.
Yeah, COPS and bonds.
Your projection on expenditures is $998 million by 25-26. That's what this says, right?
The top, yes.
But the sales tax runs 3 additional years beyond that.
Yes.
So if you're going to expend all the money by 25-26, are you going to expend any money in 6, 7, and 8?
Yes.
And where does that come from?
It will, from the additional revenue and the bond, even though they're not showing here, the debt goes out that far as well. So it continues to go out. And we can bring next time the full plan for the full, through the full time period of the sales tax.
But you're saying you're getting the revenue in these 5 years and you're spending the expenses.
Well, no, so part of that is the carryover as well. If you look in the revenue in the top and the carryover, we're carrying money over from year to year to cover the cost as we're going. And then at the bottom, we're going through, and then there's carry forward in the bottom for future projects as well, underneath.
Can I help, maybe?
Sure.
Are you projecting more than, for the life of the sales tax, are you now projecting more revenue than the total amount shown in the bottom right-hand corner?
Yes, we will be receiving more because it goes out for more years than what's shown here.
So the initial annual projection of approximately 90 million a year for 10 years of 900 million has been, they're projecting now to exceed that revenue.
Mm-hmm.
Does that help?
Yeah, and the rationale for accelerating.
They have been.
I
The
think
rationale
that's
for
it.
spending it earlier before you have it in hand is also that when this was passed, we had some crying needs that were playing catch-up ball in the early years of the sales tax revenue program. So we've moved projects forward more quickly.
I think that's critical for our committee to understand that we're going to spend $1 billion in the next 5 years, but only spend $300 million in the last 3 years. So there's going to be a cliff before the sales tax ends.
That's correct, but we had
Absolutely correct.
and we had a huge need in those first 7 years.
I understand, but as we are thinking, we're also
Years 8, 9, and 10, we're paying debt service, pretty much.
Is that the plan?
There is a lot of debt in the last years, and we're also starting to look at paying debt from multiple things for them as well. In order to go out a little bit further, we may pay some debt for the projects from both sales tax and from our capital millage as well, in order to spread that debt if we need to fit within the full capital plan is what we're trying to make sure we stay within.
If the sales tax ends at the end of 10 years, can you fulfill your obligations with no sales tax?
We will still have great needs beyond that.
But you're taking debt, COPS, that you may have to extend past the revenue, the sales tax.
So what's in the plan right now, the debt, the COPS that we're getting, we're paying for within the sales tax right now. Some of the thoughts moving forward is that we may be splitting some things in order to get things done but pay them from two different areas, maybe from both sales tax and from millage. So while we can pay from sales tax, we will, and then of course when that runs out, we'll switch over to millage.
What? Now I'm confused.
At year 10, you don't
one
have the
thing to
sales
think
tax.
about.
We won't.
I know that, but we haven't borrowed with the use of COPS more capital dollars than we believe than we can pay off with sales tax revenue by year 10. Have we?
We have not right now.
Right.
But in our plans, because we still, like, this is just a 5-year look. When we go 5 to 10-year look, when we have our 10-year outlook, we still need schools.
Yeah, I understand. I'm just talking about current debt. Current COPS that have been issued and the ones contemplated to be issued under this program, the sales tax program. You are projecting enough revenue solely from sales tax to pay that debt off.
For the ones in the current 5-year plan, yes, sir.
For the ones in the fire. So I understand that we're fronting the cost because we have a need and we're also saving money by building earlier rather than later. I understand it, but we're not issuing debt for a greater amount than what we're budgeting we can pay back for with just sales tax revenue.
Right now, we are not.
If you make a decision, and you probably will, to expend more dollars for capital because the district continues to grow, there'll be other revenue sources made available to pay that debt back when you make the decisions to issue that debt.
Correct.
All right.
The capital, we'll go back to capital millage having to pay debt, more
Impact
debt.
fees and whatever
Yes,
else you want
yes.
to use. There are no limitations in your documents, in your COPS. You can use other revenue today, correct, to pay that off? You're not limited just to sales tax to pay off the COPS?
That is correct.
That's what I thought. But you're budgeting to pay it off with just sales tax.
Correct.
And you're also constructing, from a project standpoint, when you re-roof a building, the useful life of that roof far extends beyond the sales tax period. That electrical switchgear, hurricane glass, a significant number of the maintenance projects have lives that go well beyond the 10-year window. And, the reality is we were probably 3 or 4 years behind on those kinds of projects.
At least.
And we've been able to play catch-up ball in these 3 years, and we'll be doing it for probably 3 more. And then you reach a point where you'll start to do projects ahead of, you'll actually be able to not have, to be in a panic about it.
But I do now understand Chris's point, is that in years 8, 9, and 10 of this first initial issue,
do less.
we won't be building a lot of new things with sales tax.
Right.
And we need to be aware of that, because as we go to back to the public to reissue another 10 years of sales tax, that's going to have to be explained extremely well, that remember the voters' memories about 6 months. What have you done for me lately?
Yeah, I'm not really sure I'm comfortable with front-loading all this. I know it meets, this is a departure from what we were sold over the last couple of years, that we were going to sort of spend as we raised, and now we are really front-loading it. Or at least I didn't understand we were going to spend, over $200 million a year for the next 5 years.
You're probably going to taper down to a more sustainable pace in the last 3 years. A pretty breakneck pace in the first 7.
But that's when you are going to have to go to the voters.
That's correct.
And
Right.
do you save any powder to actually build this rather than front-load it?
It's an interesting concept. I understood that what we were doing was front-loading the cost because we were behind the 8 ball. We were way behind. And I understood that we were going to take more time to pay that off. I think this is the first time where we've seen that in year 8, 9, and 10, it could be, we're not sure yet because we don't know what the sales tax projections are going to be as we continue out that far. It could be just paying debt service those last 3 years.
Right.
We don't know that yet.
I don't want to be on this committee when we're just paying debt service and not building anything.
I hear you.
My term will probably be over by then.
Yeah, I've been there and doing 20-year GO bonds when you build all the projects in the first 3 years, and the last 17 years you're paying debt service for the projects you do. you go to pass another GO bond, it's like, what did you do? Well, 17 years ago, we built
the
all
old
this.
building.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is one of the
I've been
reasons.
there, done that from a policymaker standpoint, and I appreciate you raising that point, because until now, I haven't thought about that as a position of reselling the issue 10 years from now.
Yeah.
I would ask that staff contemplate at least some initial strategies as to what are we going to do from a capital standpoint, using all available revenue, to make sure that we continue to build new things in year 8, 9, and 10.
And that's why we were looking at split funding versus all sales tax funding, so that we didn't have just debt service being paid in those last years, so that it did still show that we were still working on the safety concerns, the technology, the maintenance of our schools as well, because we did not want just our last years to be debt.
I have just one other question. The reserves for future projects at the bottom, those aren't cumulative numbers, are they? Those are annual?
Carried forward.
It's from one year to the next, so
So that's individual carry forward from that year?
that was what is expected from those years.
Okay. Because
So,
in my 5-year projections for cities, the bottom line, the reserves is cumulative.
yeah,
And so it actually, you know what you actually have available in that year, whether you choose to spend it or not. That maybe put another line underneath the cumulative numbers, and that way we can see what we actually have in the bank.
Well, and you notice at the end of 5 years, it's essentially zero.
Yeah, so that's why, that's the real reason why I wanted to look at the cum, because in my 5-year projections for cities, that's the selling point. What you
That's
have
the
available.
cum.
Yeah, the
Is
cum.
zero.
Well, is the cum zero?
It's a carry forward from year to year.
I don't see the revenue, the carry forward up above.
It's strangely
yeah, it's prior year carryovers up under the revenue at the top. Right,
line.
up above where the total
Prior year
estimated
carry-
revenue
okay,
is.
Prior
I got you.
carryovers
So
up
it
top.
goes from there up to the, okay.
Yeah,
So you're saying, ooh, now I'm really,
At the end of
now
5 years,
you have zero money available for anything.
so for the last 3 years,
Last
you
3
have
years.
just your revenues from the sales tax.
Paying
which will
off the debt service.
Essentially pay off the debt.
I-
Yeah, when I saw 275 million, which is the first time I think that's been in the presentation, I was like, wow, we're front-loading and I think the 181 in COPS was higher than it was the last time. I don't have the numbers.
yeah, I don't remember.
But 275 million up front means at the last 3 years, you're paying that.
Yeah, I hear that.
If I understand the discussion and the input from the committee, it's not that we think there's anything being done mistakenly in accelerating the program.
No.
It's what it's going to look like in the last few years with those, you refer to the public only has a memory for 6 months. Let's say that's a year. What are you going to look like when you go back and talk about projects that have happened? And that's probably good political advice as opposed to improving your facilities and your security and all that advice.
And I'm sorry.
Worth thinking about.
This is even worse, because what you see in year 4 and 5, from a construction perspective, is a zero. So you're going to have year 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 are all zero construction.
Conceivably.
Conceivably, if you're using your revenues in the last 3 years to pay off your debt, you don't have any money for construction projects. So although they're spending, 102, 227, and 140 in the next 3 years.
That's probably worth doing some head scratching on, Kelly.
We'll have some discussions around that.
The question would become, if you took the perspective of, let's assume it didn't pass, if you really wanted to be rude about it, what would you not be doing? And the answer, if you could answer that question, what could we postpone and not hurt the educational mission in order to level out the expenditures into those last few years? That's probably worth considering. Worth thinking about.
Yes. And we have had that discussion with the board on all of our reserves for our capital. It is not where we would like our reserves to be. And so we are going through the capital plan, trying to figure out what adjustments can be made in order to bring our reserves in line.
Right, okay.
And we have had that discussion with board members as well.
But reserves doesn't enter into this.
That would be our carry forward piece that we have.
No, my goal in this committee is that after 10 years, if we've raised $1 billion, that we spend $1 billion. Zero
at the end of the year.
Day. What I wouldn't want to see is in the last 3 years, we didn't spend anything. We just paid off what we spent in the first
Yes.
7.
Yes, I understand.
Or unless you really want to, that's going to be a very desperate play to the voters in year 10, when you haven't spent
And you
anything in
also
5
don't
years
want
on
to
new
get yourself
construction.
behind the 8 ball again either, the way you were when thankfully this passed.
Yes.
I would also suggest that a window of 8 or 9 years is likely to have a recession or at least a setback in some of these. So while we're very aggressive and optimistic, that's an economic cycle. 8 years is, we're in the 11th inning of a economic expansion right now. So
We do need to remember, though, that this plan is dynamic and things can move off and on the capital budgeting process. I mean, if we had to pull in our belts, we could do less and still operate within the funds that we have available.
and if you're borrowing, I mean, it's a great time to borrow. I'm all in favor of that.
Right now.
I'm just worried about the latter years.
We're still spending, or is projected to spend $40 million, approximately $50 million a year in year 4 and 5, 24, 25, and 26, 28, in maintenance projects, technology projects. We're just not doing any new capital projects. So, because half of the revenue is going to be debt service. We're going to be used up for debt service in those years. So
We'll still be building the schools. If you go to the plan at the bottom, you'll see, like in the east zone, where you see the, like the middle school and the east zone innovation school and all of that, that is where that debt, where those COPs are coming in. They're being built during that point, but we have to go out for the COPs in the beginning of it, and then we start paying the debt within that time frame. So the schools are being built. They're still going through and being built during that time.
I think what we're looking for is staff to look at some strategies as to, while you may have budgeted to pay the total debt for these projects out of sales tax, maybe using some other funds to pay off debt to free up some debt, some sales tax revenue for new capital projects in the outer years. That's very easily done.
Yes.
You've got to have capital impact fees well over your budgets based on the building boom.
Yes, and that's one of the things that we were looking at.
I know you can use those to pay off the COPs. So.
Yeah.
All right. It's creative accounting time. This is a budget, and a budget is not a financial tool, it's a planning tool.
Yeah.
Areas we want to talk about? All right.
Thank you, Mrs.
take a
Fletcher,
motion.
for your presentation.
Mr. Chair, I'll move that we approve, do we need?
No, I'm sorry. I skipped the things we have to approve.
Yes.
Go ahead. Will you make the motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the projects as presented to comply with the requirements of the sales
Second
tax
for that.
referendum.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Do you have another motion, Joe?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we approve the financial report as presented.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous?
Just want to make sure we
Anything else?
captured that Mr. Mazurkowitz made both motions, Mr. Schimpf seconded both, is that correct?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Mr. Mazurkowitz made both?
Separated, seconded the first motion, and I don't know who seconded.
Mr. Schimpf? Chris? Okay.
Chris seconded.
Okay. And I also wanted to bring to your attention that I neglected to notify you that before the project discussions began, Ms. Michelle Perez Macias from our committee member joined us, so she is present today.
I didn't hear that, I'm sorry.
Ms. Macias is present.
One of the committee members came in.
We have another committee.
Okay, all right, excuse me. Thank you. These ears don't always work well. Is there anything else for the evening? I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
Second.
Thank you all for attending.